This week on Quality Digest Live, we look at metrology software solutions with David O'Neill of New River Kinematics.
Plus, the business case for social responsibility. That and more when we come back.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for August 17th, 2012. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Mike Richmond, publisher of Quality Digest.
And I'm Quality Digest Editor-in-Chief, Dirk Ducharme. So, social media and customer expectations are the topic of a report just out from Gartner. According to the report, as familiarity with social media grows, your customers' expectations about how organizations will use these channels are evolving. By 2014, says Gartner, organizations that refuse to communicate with customers by social media, this is like Twitter, Facebook, and so forth, will face the same level of wrath as those that don't respond to emails or phone calls.
Yeah.
The same. Don't reply to your Twitter comment, and that's going to start ticking people off.
Yep.
According to Carol Roswell, Vice President and Distinguished Analyst at Gartner, the dissatisfaction stemming from failure to respond via social channels can lead up to a 15% increase in churn rate for existing customers. That's a huge number.
15%?
You're gonna tick them off.
1 out of every 7, amazing.
There you go.
Yep.
So it's important that you respond to customers on every channel you have, even what I call the Me Too channels. And the reason I call them Me Too is, oh, I got to have a Facebook page. Okay, so I got a Facebook. Okay, I got to have a Twitter. Okay, I got to have a Twitter. And the thing is, we're not paying attention to them very often.
Right.
But people are commenting on your Facebook page and your Twitter channels. And now those are the things you need to start having a plan in place to look at. So you have to respond to these channels, Twitter, Facebook, whatever it is, any social media channel, just as diligently as you would phone or email. And you also need to decide what kind of comments or complaints you respond to. Forget about responding to the quacks, you're not going to satisfy them anyway. And who is responsible. So you have to have a plan. Right. And I was thinking about this story, and this story came up just coincidentally, something kind of interesting. It's not really social media, but it does relate to responding and being aware of the emotional response in today's electronic media. Not too long ago, I was over at a friend's house. And there's a program that we watch very frequently. It's kind of a local news program. And we watch it pretty diligently. And anytime I'm over there, it's on, I think it's channel 13. It's one of the local news programs. And we're watching it. And I go over one day, and it's not turned on. The different news channels on. News channel this guy never watches, he and his wife. And I say, well, how come you don't have whatever it was, channel 13 on? He says, they said something yesterday that ticked me off. I said, really? He said, yeah, and I'm not going to watch them anymore. I said, well, what'd they say? And he went, I don't remember. And I said, well, who said it? Which newscaster was it? Because some of them are kind of really jokey. And I thought, well, kind of maybe spur of the moment thing. He said, I don't remember. I said, well, it must have been something political, right? And he goes, you know, I just don't recall. I just remember that it really ticked me off, and I'm not going to watch them anymore. And we laughed about it. I'm saying, okay, so somebody, don't know who, said something,
you don't remember.
You're not sure what, and now you're not going to watch because you're not sure why, but it just really ticked you off. And we laughed about it for a bit.
Customer lost, right?
A customer lost. But the thing that struck me about it is it was one strike, you're out.
Yes.
It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to write a letter to the TV station and tell them that I thought that comment was really inappropriate. It's like, no, somebody said something, and I don't even remember what it is anymore, but I had an emotional response, and you're done with. And that's the end of it. And I thought, wow, that is really crazy. Well, no, I mean, not crazy, but I mean, it's kind of, I think, something that is happening more and more in today's instant gratification e-media market. Twitter, Facebook, television, radio. It's like you don't get a second chance because I can just as easily go somewhere else and get my news.
It's the commoditization of news and media, as well as many of you out there are facing within the quality space too. These industries that we've grown up with that have provided a lot of value now really are becoming commoditized, and yeah, it means that you need to be much more diligent about responding to customer complaints and comments, and if you let those things go, well, what's going to happen? Customers are going to leave, right?
And you got to have a plan in place.
Got to have a plan in place. Good story. Thanks, Dirk. Okay. Also in the news this week, a recent report from the Advanced Manufacturing Partnership, or AMP, offered recommendations to reinvent and invigorate U.S. manufacturing. The report was presented by a prestigious 18-person steering committee appointed by President Obama in June 2011. The committee, whose purpose is to help U.S. manufacturing firms recapture competitive advantage, is led by Susan Hockfield, President Emerita of MIT, and Andrew Liveris, President, Chairman, and CEO of Dow Chemical Company. Pretty prestigious people. As you would expect from a committee so led, their recommendations for improvement center upon solutions from industry as well as academia. Broadly, the committee advised a greater focus on innovation, securing the talent pipeline, and improving the overall business climate. Specific proposals contained within the report advised the formation of a national network of manufacturing innovation institutes, greater investment in community colleges as manufacturing training grounds, and changes to the trade, tax, regulatory, and energy policies to level the global playing field in favor of domestic manufacturers. Now, the White House is already taking steps to implement many of these recommendations contained within the report, including the formation of the Advanced Manufacturing National Program Office, which will be hosted by NIST. The office will coordinate federal resources and foster the creation of private-public partnerships, all focused on innovation. So for more information on this ongoing story, click on the link just below the player page right here. Innovation, it's something that's been kind of in the water lately, this idea that we need to innovate better within manufacturing, that American manufacturing needs a little bit of support. And if you look at that steering committee, you look at that panel, and you look at who's on it, again, very prominent people. Right. This is not something that the administration is taking lightly. This is not something that any of us are taking lightly, because obviously as Americans, we're interested in our manufacturing base being supported and being able to provide the people we need to take those jobs going forward. Right,
well, and we've talked about it on the show before, is the fact that manufacturing is going overseas and is a done deal. I mean, anybody who thinks we're going to get anything back is crazy. I mean, the world is more global. Manufacturing is going to go where it's going to go, and it's going to go there for economical purposes. So it's always going to go where it's less expensive, and that's just the way it is.
But this report is not about a race to the bottom. This report is not about getting that lowest cost manufacturing. It's about innovating at the highest advanced levels.
That's what I'm saying. So if your manufacturing is going out, then what you really, kind of your capital is the ideas. It's innovating, it's coming up with the products, it's developing the products, it's testing the products and so forth. Once the product is developed, it's going to be manufactured wherever it's going to be manufactured. Maybe it's here, maybe it's over there, who knows. But the important thing is, and it's been said many times, and we really are becoming more of kind of the innovators and the drivers of the technology as opposed to the manufacturers of it. And so the innovation aspect is really important. You don't want to lose that.
No,
and by the way, we're being challenged on this all over the place.
Sure.
I mean, you know, it's not like the Chinese don't have innovators, it's not like the Indians don't have innovators, they do, and more as time goes by. So the playing field is not so much in our favor anymore as it used to be.
Well, you know, in past decades, you had to pretty much come to America. If you were if you were a thought leader in your country and you wanted to be in the game big time, you had to come to America or Europe perhaps, or maybe Japan. But now, you know, with proliferation obviously of real-time communications anywhere in the world, you can stay at home. Why do you have to leave China? Why do you have to leave India or any other nation? If you want to be a thought leader in that space, you can be there and be perfectly plugged into the rest of the world. It's changing game.
It is.
Interesting stuff.
Okay, well, speaking of innovation and interesting products, as you know, on this show and Technorazzi Live and in the editorial coverage on our website, we cover 3D metrology quite a bit, as well as everything kind of related to 3D technology. Typically, we cover the hardware, but today we're going to talk a bit about the software. Any of you who have ever purchased 3D measurement equipment know that the manufacturer packages it typically with their own data analysis software, point cloud analysis, 3D measurement analysis. And the software is typically more than enough. The problem is, what if you have equipment from more than one vendor? And that's not unusual. Not every vendor can meet the needs of every single function that they're trying to measure. The software may not have the capability to read from other instruments other than the equipment that it was supposed to function with. Or it may not have the functionality that you would like to have to solve certain problems. That's when you turn to third-party 3D analysis software, and one of the biggest players in this field is spatial analyzer software from New River Kinematics. Here today to tell us about the advantages for third-party analysis software is David O'Neill from New River Kinematics. Hi, David. How are you doing?
Good. How are you doing, Mike? Dirk?
Hey, pretty good.
Good.
So just kind of a brief history of New River Kinematics, and then we'll get right into the advantages of having a third-party analysis software instead of the software that might come with your own piece of hardware.
Well, New River Kinematics, as the name suggests, we're really an engineering company that does happen to make metrology software. We actually use metrology software early on in robotics-based applications for robotic alignments, and we are spatial relationship experts. That's what we do, and hence the name Kinematics. In the process of doing that, we have developed a device or a software that we felt could take in inputs from multiple metrology devices that we would use or our customers would use and get it into one platform. And that was really the idea. Take any device, whether it be arm tracker, laser radar, theodolite, or even point scanners, and bring them all into one common platform for analysis.
And this would include even CMMs, for instance?
We mostly focus on portable metrology, CMMs being stationary. There are a lot of great products for CMMs, for part inspection. That's really not our focus, although we do have a few applications with gantry type devices.
Okay, so kind of to get to the crux of the matter then, what is the value of third-party software for doing your data analysis as opposed to the software that comes with your arm, your tractor, your long-range scanner, short-range scanner, etc.?
Well, and that's a good question. I mean, aside from the obvious fact that most of them are designed to run one manufacturer's equipment or maybe something just in that same class of equipment, when you think of arms and trackers and a lot of hardwares like that come with standard software, most of it's designed to do just a handful of things very, very well. And they tend to do them very well, and that most often is inspection. Think go, no-go, is something in or out of tolerance. And that works great if you've got small parts or parts that you plan on rejecting and going back later to figure out how to remanufacture them. But if you think about things like in our world where parts are either very large or very expensive and we need to do rework to them just to make them fit, we can't trash them, then that's where SA picks up where they leave off. More advanced analysis and having to figure out how to make things work.
Hey, David, let me jump in here for a moment. We as you know, and as much the audience knows, we produce the Journal of the CMSC for the group, the Coordinate Metrology Systems Conference, the Coordinate Metrology Society. And when you read the Journal of the CMSC, you see SA, New River Kinematics, mentioned often in the case studies and white papers that are presented at the show and are presented in that journal. So tell us a little bit about how the different sectors that you work within, how these case studies come to be, and how you work with different people in industry and in academia to do their projects using SA.
Sure. Generally speaking, that traditional inspection, how well did this hole line up to what the blueprint said, tends to be fairly dull in nature, which is probably why you don't see those so much in white papers at the CMSC. But a lot of the things that we do tend to get much more advanced. If you think joining, this is an extreme example, but joining two hulls of a ship, something that's very large that needs to be translated positionally and make sure it's approaching at the right angle. That's difficult to do in most software, and we track everything in 6 degrees of freedom. So we can do things like long-range alignments or joins, or even if we wanted to measure ahead of time to see if they will fit when they get together, we call that virtual fit-up. But when you see a lot of these white papers, it's usually somebody trying to do something very complex or something out of the norm that they're trying to share, and we provide a platform that allows really anyone to do anything with their measurement data and make any kind of relationship they want to show deviations, differences, or how things are coming together.
David, give us an example of the types of equipment, maybe an actual case study that you can think of, where you're combining data that comes from one particular type of equipment, like an arm, let's say, and combining that data with another type of equipment. And just kind of show us kind of how these various pieces of equipment might come together for a complex measurement application.
Well, one of the things that we've done recently is we've taken a large area scanner, a surface or scanner, to scan an old historic church. And for our ability to be able to stitch all these scans together, we used a laser tracker to locate the scanner. We've got an example of it on our website, but you can see how we've stitched it all together. Plus, we used a total station to locate a few fixed points along the church and the outside that we needed to track if we ever wanted to come back at a later date. And that's a great example of using scanner, tracker, and a total station in one platform.
Okay. And then when that data comes together, let's say in the church example, then what was done with the data that might be something that'd be a little unusual to do, and maybe something you wouldn't do in your typical off-the-shelf software that comes with a product?
Well, I think about if you wanted to track something as it changed over time, maybe even if something's getting out of level. You know, trackers and total stations, we can often work in a level plane, so we can establish some level reference points that a scanner may not be able to, and keep some of those things tracked in. That, you know, we're using the benefits of one device to help another. Okay.
Is there something, I guess one thing I'm looking for is something that's kind of unique about Spatial Analyzer over and above, let's say, other products that are out there in the market. Yes, this is your chance to make your pitch for why Spatial Analyzer is so cool.
Well, one of the things I talked about earlier was if you've got something that's small that you can reject based on inspection criteria, you know, that's very good for most of the world out there. But let's say you're dealing with something like an aircraft wing where it's not a matter of is it in or out, it's how to make it work, right? So we usually take the inspection criteria and not just say does it fit, does it not, but we do what we call a relationship fit. And that's the ability to float in all of your tolerances to see if you can make it work, will it fit? And even if you can't, what's the minimum amount of rework you can do? Next Tuesday, when we do the actual in-depth demonstration, that is one of the things that we will be showcasing.
David, I'm glad you pointed out the bit about being able to see if a part will fit even if it's out of tolerance, because I believe one of the things we're going to cover in the webinar that we're doing with you guys next week is, if I remember exactly, you have a automobile door frame, right, and you're comparing the as-built to the CAD model. And if I remember right, it would appear to be that the door is quite a bit out of tolerance, but what you show that you can do with your software is that Spatial Analyzer can actually analyze that door and see if it will actually fit given the tolerances, even though some of the key tolerances seem to be out of spec. Do I have that right?
Yeah, that's about right. When you think of traditional inspection, it's usually aligned to A datum, B datum, and C datum, and then see how everything else fits. You'll end up with some features that are well within tolerance and some that might be out slightly. Well, what would happen if you were able to float some of those features that were way in? Would that pull some of the others back in tolerance? And that's what we give you the ability to do without having to do a lot of manual work or waiting. We just hit a button and we'll let you know if that part could work or not.
Okay, terrific.
Yeah, and that's obviously next Tuesday, the 21st. That's at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. There is a story link on Spatial Analyzer right below the player page here, and you can navigate out through that, right out to the registration page, and you can check out the webinar on the 21st, next Tuesday. So, David, we'll see you then. We're going to get into this much deeper with you and Dirk and Todd Birch and talk about these issues then.
Oh, we're looking forward to it. Thank you very much, Mike. Dirk.
Okay. Thanks, David.
Thanks, David. We'll talk to you then. Yeah, good stuff there. It's going to be a really interesting webinar on the 21st. Again, that's Tuesday, 21st at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. Sign up for it right below the player page right there.
Right. It'll be interesting. And by the way, this webinar does include a video component. One thing that we haven't had before, and actually I think we're going to see it this. No, actually, I'm sorry, we did. Yeah. We did one other webinar that had video on it, and actually that was very successful, and we're going to do it again. So this is your regular screen sharing as well as a video component. Really works well for this type of subject. So.
That's right. Great. All right, we're going to move on now. Okay, our next article was one from Dr. Robert G. Burney, MD, medical doctor. We have in Quality Digest Daily this week. He actually appeared in Monday's issue of QDD. The title of the piece was "Selling the Business Side of Social Responsibility," and Dr. Robert G. Burney is the author. Well, in the context of for-profit businesses, of course, the notion of social responsibility always has to have some sort of a payoff, right? You have to look at that and say, well, we're going to be socially responsible if it pays off for us in some way, shape, or form. But really the question is, how do you define that? Because payback, payoff is, it could mean many things to many different people. The author, Dr. Burney, uses a couple of different examples within the text of his article. The first one is of a Baldrige winner that won a Baldrige Award several years ago. And really ironically, this Baldrige winner started their journey towards the Baldrige Award by practically, and I think actually being sued as a gross polluter within their community. They were notified that they were going to be sued, and that enabled the CEO of that company to begin to look at their processes and say to himself and his team, well, gosh, yeah, we shouldn't be polluting, but even more than that in terms of payback, we're spending a lot of money to pollute. I mean, all that stuff, all that waste flowing out of our factory into the local rivers is lost money, right? I mean, Bill Levinson talks about it in the context of Henry Ford all the time in this space, where Ford recognized 100 years ago that all the black smoke going up their smokestacks was just wasted material of some sort. So this particular Baldrige winner, who was almost a gross pollutant, redefined their processes to get rid of that waste, saved a lot of money, did the socially responsible thing, and improved their business. Another example was one that the author used from his own personal life. He stuck photovoltaic solar cells up on the roof of his home, of his domicile. And some of his friends laughed at him and said, well, heck, the payback on that's going to be years, decades, right? But what the author's actually found when he's looked at it is he's getting 6% return on that investment, tax-free, every year, because you don't pay taxes on savings, right? So 6% tax-free return on that investment. And any professional financial planner would take that in a heartbeat, 6% tax-free, right? It's a great return. Finally, he uses an example Bernie uses an example from his own experiences working with doctors and hospitals of a CEO of a health center who was running a health fair and providing free care for indigent kids within the community. And Bernie asked him, well, why are you doing that? And the doctor's response was, well, those kids play with my kids. So if I keep those kids healthy, my kids will be healthy, better all around. And plus, another benefit of this is, who do you think, when those kids grow up, who do you think they're going to go to for health care? Right? They're going to go to the place where they had a good experience, they got some great care, great quality care, and you kind of train them to be future customers. All this really, these three examples really all boil down to the same thing. They're really the same example. The idea that you need to reframe, you need to accept social responsibility as your responsibility, but you need to reframe it in for-profit businesses and make sure that management understands that if you do it right, there will be a payback. There will be a payback in terms of savings. There may be a payback in terms of increased earnings. Certainly the community is going to be better. The health of the planet is going to be better. The health of the people that are in your community are going to be better as well. And certainly Bernie, from the perspective of being a doctor, has that health of the people firmly in mind here.
Right.
And it's interesting because we really don't actually have a lot of doctors write for us. We have a lot of PhDs, but we don't have very many MDs who write for us. So his perspective on this quality issue is one that's a little broader and a little bit different. I think it's a good perspective for us to have and carry forward.
Right. It's interesting because he really touches a lot of issues that another one of our columnists, Bill Levinson, talks about, which is, regardless of, and let's just take a hot button topic, regardless of your feelings on global warming, is it real, is it not real, regardless of your feelings on that, the point that Bill Levinson would point out, and I think is also kind of the point that Bernie's pointing out, is that regardless of, let's say, your feeling on global warming, the idea that you're putting stuff into the air that doesn't really belong there should be reason enough to say, well, maybe we shouldn't be doing it. And oh, by the way, if I'm putting pollutants into the air, I'm wasting money because stuff out the stack is waste, and it's lost green.
It is right, yeah, exactly right, and that's
green in both senses.
In both senses of the word, right. Yeah. And that's what he's getting at here, is the idea that look at it from all the perspectives. Look at payback, not just in terms of dollars and cents, but all the things that goes into payback and what that really means for organizations and for individuals. Because organizations need to balance the needs of the organization, the company, with also the needs of the people that work within that company and the people that are in the communities in which they have their factories and their plants and everything else. Right. So, good reminder. I think it's something that we all need to be thoughtful of. We encourage more doctors out there to write us,
right? Exactly.
With their perspectives, because they always have a unique perspective that I think that we need in Quality Digest.
Right, and keep in mind that there's just a lot of common sense that goes into being a good citizen of the planet.
A good steward.
A good steward is usually, if you're doing the right thing, there is actually a bottom line payoff somewhere down the line for it as well. So I mean, I think that's just kind of common sense.
Yeah, you have to understand what those things are. But you can find them if you're willing to look for them.
Yep, they're there.
Stuff. Okay, well, we have an interesting tech corner today.
Yes, we do. About this little device, it's the X-Rite RM200QC. But before we get into that, companies spend a lot of money on developing their color. They'll spend tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars to come up with their corporate color, or the color for their packaging for a product, or for the product itself, because they want that product to leap off the shelves, for instance, right? And so a lot of thought goes into color. Now, once you've defined that color, you want to make sure that color stays consistent from product to product, from year to year, for the lifetime of the product. Or if it's a corporate logo, you want it to last forever, right? Color is very important to the perception of a product or a company. So that's where these devices come in. They enable the person on the shop floor to make sure that the color that a product coming off the assembly line, or a color swatch they're working with, maybe the color of fabric that they're going to use for a product, is consistent from lot to lot. Now, the way this product works, and we'll get into the details in just a little bit, is essentially you record a color standard. So you actually just use this to measure your standard. And then from there, that standard is stored, and then you can take it to your samples, and it compares the sample to the standard, and it gives you a pass-fail. It also gives you some details on the color space and the actual color attributes of the product that of the color that you've just measured. So let's show you how this works. First of all, come over here to the gauge cam, and if we get that centered on there. Okay, this is the front of the product, very small. Flip it over. I want to show you something interesting about the back. If we look up here where my thumb is, that's where the optics are. That's the business end. And this flap simply closes over it for storage. Now, the interesting thing is that the white swatch used for calibration is actually stored underneath this little lid, so that when we close this, it's actually ready for calibration. So you don't ever have to worry about losing the calibration swatch, of it getting dirty. It's nice and safe right here underneath the lid, ready to go. So one of the first things I want to do is I want to shut the device off, because I want to show you what happens when you power up. So first thing that happens, I power up, and it asks me in just a second here to calibrate. It requires calibration every time you power it up. It reminds you that the lid needs to be closed. That's what this message says here. I press my little trigger button, and now it takes maybe 10, 15 seconds to calibrate the device. Once it's calibrated, it's good to go, and we can start taking measurements. Now, what we're going to do first is we're going to record our standard. So I'm going to create a standard right from scratch, show you how easy it is. Just happen to have a yellow piece of Post-it note, so that is going to be our standard. Post-it note yellow is going to be our standard. So I'm in standard mode. I tell it that I want to edit this standard, or create a standard, and I'm inside of it, and I'm going to take 3 measurements. There's my first measurement. Oh, and it reminded me, sorry, I was reading with that. It told me that I didn't have my optics. I was still in calibration mode, and my lid was still closed. So let's start from scratch then on this. Sorry about that. That's what little warning messages are all about. So we'll go back into edit mode on
Nice
this.
little functionality.
Nice little functionality there.
Yeah.
Okay, we're ready to go. So now we're going to take our measurements. There's our first measurement. Hey, no error message. There's our second measurement. And here is our third measurement. It will average those, And now, and here's some details on those measurements, what the color attributes actually are. And now our standard is there. All I have to do is save it, tell it yes, and our standard is good to go. Now we can go into measurement mode. One mouse click over, I'm ready to measure. Now what I can do is if I just measure this standard again, it should tell me that it passes. We would hope that it would pass since it's what I just measured. And sure enough, I get a nice little green check mark down there, which tells me I've passed. But let's compare it to a different yellow. I happen to have
a very close yellow.
A very close yellow. In fact, let me show you. This is happen to have a book here. This on your screen there, these yellows probably appear to be fairly close, and they are in fact fairly close. This one is a bit, my standard is a bit a lighter yellow than the standard on this book, than the color on this book, but we'll just measure the one in this book just the same. So I come over here and I'm ready to take my sample. I take my color, and sure enough, a big red X mark tells me that this sample failed. It also tells me how far off it was, and if I want, I can actually look at the color attributes of what I just took a picture of here, and it would tell me what the color actually is. Now, again, you can set the degree of error that you will accept. You can set your error band on this. So if you want, right now it's set to 1%, you can set it to higher, you can set it to lower. It's set to 1% by default, meaning that as long as I am within 1% of error, it will accept the color. If I'm outside of that, it won't accept it. I've played around with this. I've played with some color swatches, paint swatches from different manufacturers that look, I swear, look almost identical. And it will detect that there's a difference. Now I will say this is really used more for paint, fabric, plastic. It is not really intended for use on metallic. X-Rite has a different instrument for measuring, let's say, opalescent paints, metal flake paints. This really isn't an automobile paint measurement device. It's really intended more for flat, matte surfaces. Now, the other thing that's interesting about this is you can hook this directly to certain printers, and you can print a report directly to a printer, or you can connect it to your computer, download all of your sample data. By the way, I believe this takes up to 300 samples. Download that into your computer, or you can download a PDF report direct to your computer, and then of course email it out. The thing that is kind of slick though is that you can connect it directly to several different types of inkjet printers. Just press a button and it'll print a report right out to a printer, and you don't even need to have a computer on hand. So again, this is the X-Rite RM200 QC from X-Rite. Cool little product, due out in September.
Due out in September, yeah. Great product, great tech corner there. If any of you have interesting products that you're working with that you'd like us to feature on Tech Corner, just write us at qdl@qualitydigest.com and we'll get them on the air for you.
There you go.
Great, thanks Derek, and thank you X-Rite for providing that to us. All right, well we're going to close the show, but before we do, I want to take a personal moment here, a personal moment for all of us at Quality Digest. All of us here at the Digest are very close. We're all one big team. Those of us that work here now and those of us that have
worked with us in the past.
Here in the past. Many of you may have known Louise Krager. She worked in our circulation and our accounting.
Right. In fact, if you've been with us long enough and were around in the print days, then you know that good chance you talked to Louise on the phone.
You may have talked to Louise.
She was handler of circulation
a few years back. Well, Louise is unfortunately very ill right now. We've been thinking about her all week. She's definitely in our minds. She's definitely in our hearts, and most certainly in our prayers. And we're thinking of you, Louise. We're thinking of your family at this time. So
that's right.
Just wanted to make note of that before we close the show. All right. Well, that is our show for this week. Thank you again for joining us. We'll be back at you next Monday with another full week of Quality Digest Daily. And of course, we'll be here next Friday with Quality Digest Live at 11 a.m., 2 p.m. Pacific.
So long.
We'll see you. Bye.